We also want to thank the funder of this video and webinar series, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, who have been a great supporter of our work over the past several years. So just a little bit about our project with these 4R virtual field days. So we've done 2. This is our second and final virtual field day. We produced these videos in October, November of this past fall, and this was the result of the fact that we couldn't host our regular in-person 4R field day last fall. And so we decided to pivot a little bit and try the virtual field day approach with the combination of videos and panel discussion to keep it engaging. We want these videos to be shared and get out there to a wide audience. So, please share them at your events, or if you have particular audiences that you'd like to share them with. We just ask that if you are going to share it, that you let us know, just so that we can have record of the number of people that this project reaches. We also ask that you take our follow-up survey. If you attended our field day, our virtual field day last Thursday, I did send out a follow-up survey at the end. And if you haven't taken that survey, we would really appreciate your responses for that. And we're going to be sending out another survey after this webinar. And we would really appreciate just knowing a little bit more about if you think this program is helpful and what you'd like to see from our organization next. And as a quick reminder, please continue to be typing your name in the chat box at this point. I also wanted to do a quick plug. All of our videos that we've created are going to be on our YouTube page. Most of them are already up there. The 2 that you're seeing today are going to be up there later this week. And so that's a great place for you to go and just see all of the different resources that we have available, including several of the webinars that we've had last fall and last summer. And we also have some other additional videos that were made as part of this NIFWF work. So please go check that out and subscribe. And now I'm going to hand it over to Eric Rosenbaum, who's the PA4R Executive Director, and he's going to talk a little bit about our 4R activities.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. I have a few PowerPoint slides that I wanted to share with you today. What 4Rs is going to be doing over the next year. We have a lot going on, and we just want to share with you kind of the projects that we've had wrapping up in 2020 and some projects that we have rolling out in 2021. Our goal in the organization continues to be to provide you with in-field data and economic analysis for in-field practices so that you can kind of compare what you may be doing in a nutrient management plan or what you are doing with your customers in the field, and just make sure that we're doing everything that we can to move the ball forward with nutrient use efficiency and improving on-farm economics. For ours, we feel sustainability is a 3-pronged approach. It's economics, it's environmental, and it's social. Without profitable farms, we're not going to have farms that are willing to invest in conservation and move forward with nutrient use efficiency. So highlights from our 2017 NIFWF project, and we'll have a presentation coming out later in 2021 to kind of go over the whole 2017 NIFWF project, but I wanted to share with you a couple of highlights of the project. We had surveyed farmers within the Swatara Creek watershed in Lebanon County. They were all farmers that had very close relationships with their consultants and with their ag retailers, and what we were looking at is the practices that they were adopting in field that may be part of their nutrient management plan, that may be outside of their nutrient management plan, and just look at adoption rates and then how those adoption practices fit in with the Chesapeake Bay CAST model. So a couple of interesting highlights. We found that 85% of the acres that we surveyed met supplemental nutrient management requirements for nitrogen rate and phosphorus rate. So that was a really high number when you think of farms that are adopting manure management plans or even adopting Act 38 plans. That gets us to core nitrogen and core phosphorus, right? And then the supplemental practices are pretty much what farmers do to implement that plan. And so what we found is that 85% of the surveyed acres were going above and beyond those core practices to adjust their nitrogen fertilization rates and their phosphorus rates to meet what we would consider supplemental nitrogen and phosphorus requirements. Other thing that we found is that 85% of those acres met the nitrogen timing requirement in the Chesapeake Bay model. And finally, 77% met phosphorus placement and 92% met nitrogen placement. So they're pretty big numbers. When you think about the acreage that may be in the Swatara Creek watershed, or even the acres that represent farms that work closely with their ag retailer or their certified crop advisor, to think that you could have 80 to 90% adoption of supplemental practices that you could count towards your county WIP goals, or even just look at advanced nutrient management practices, the number could be pretty high. So we're going to have some more information coming out later this year about the project, how we did the project, how you could interpret these results. So look for that coming out later in 2021. But while I have you for a few minutes, I do want to talk about some of the projects we have coming up in 2020. We talked last week that, for our organization in Pennsylvania, it's kind of a big tent organization. We have lots of different stakeholders, and we use those stakeholders within our projects. So our 2020 NIFWIF project has 4 pillars. And the first pillar is a 4R assessment on 300 farms. So we did the 4R assessment within the Swatara Creek watershed, and we found fairly high adoption rates of supplemental practices. We want to take that to the next step and survey farms throughout the state to find out what their adoption levels are of 4R practices, what their knowledge level is, and how we can assist them in years to come. And that's going to be headed up by the Nature Conservancy and some of the land-grant university partners that we have. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to increase implementation of side dressing on corn to the tune of 25,000 acres within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. That pillar is going to be led by our ag retailer stakeholders, or our ag retailer members in the organization. Penn Ag is going to head up a Manure Transport Exchange Bank in conjunction with a couple of other partners. And finally, we're really going to be rolling out membership and talking about alliance growth. We feel that we need to really focus on partnerships with other organizations to make sure that we can align 4R practices with some of the initiatives that they're working on too, particularly around the soil health realm. And the last project I wanted to share with you is our Pennsylvania Nrcs SIG project, where we're going to be looking at nitrogen modeling as a tool to determine soil health contributions to nitrogen fertility. If you've been to any of our field days over the past couple of years, we've talked about the use of a mass balance calculation to determine fertilizer requirements, and how some of the holes in that mass balance calculation are things like cover crop contribution, soil organic matter contributions, and some of the soil health practices that we're really putting a lot of effort in to increase adoption of. And we just don't have a great tool to quantify what those contributions are. So Charlie White is doing a lot of work with his cover crop calculator, and we want to start working with nitrogen modeling platforms to see if we can use a nitrogen modeling platform to provide a supplemental nitrogen rate that is equal to or better than a mass balance calculation that you may use in your Act 38 plan, or you may use in a manure management plan. So we'll have a lot of information coming out on that project in 2021 to educate people on the use of nitrogen modeling and just to update you on the project. So keep a lookout for some webinars and some posts on our Facebook page about that project and about the 2020 NIFWIF project. And as Katie had said, please stay connected with us. If you're not following us on Facebook, click the button and take care of that. And that's what I wanted to leave you with today. We have Karl Dirks with us from Lancaster County, Lancaster Seed Sales. Karl's located in Mount Joy and was working with us in fall to put together 2 videos, and we're excited to share them with you. So I will stop sharing my screen and Katie can start the videos.
Great, just give me a second to share everything.
My name's Karl Dirks, owner of Lancaster Seeds. Row crops, small grains, and wean to finish hog operation.
Wolgemuth Farview Farms has adopted a lot of economic practices through the years, but they've also adopted a number of environmental practices that are just as important. They've started doing continuous no-till about 15 years ago, and soon after that they started planting cover crops in the majority of their acres.
For the last 10 years, we've been covering 100% of the acres we farm every year.
Both the no-till and the cover crops, when paired together, allow them to reduce their soil loss on the farm by as much as 85%. And that's had a very positive impact on soil structure and soil health for the operation.
No-till and cover crops have been a big payback. We've been a lot more efficient with time, fuel, stuff like that. Equipment costs with no-till has been big savings. We haven't had to do 3 passes of tillage like we did before. And water retention has been a lot better. Soil structure has improved, and I think that's been a big part of our soil health plan.
We provide integrated pest management services like crop scouting and in-season testing, as well as environmental services like nutrient management plan writing, conservation plan writing, and odor management plan writing. We also work on the precision ag side, where we will work with farmers to manage their data and to develop prescriptions and to do site-specific planning for both seed planting as well as fertilizer application. So right now, when we're out looking at these barley fields or wheat fields, we're looking for weeds, we're looking for stand count and population, looking for any kind of early season disease or any kind of insects that might be present. Most of the time our farmers they just have a lot going on, whether they're managing pigs or they're managing a dairy. They're really good at managing other aspects of their operation, and they kind of subcontract the field walking and the integrated pest management to us.
Check my DNA.
Slug it's in the same family as a mollusk. So if a farm is going to come and put an insecticide on thinking that they're going to kill slugs, it's not going to touch it. And so what we find is that farmers that use insecticides where the insecticides are not needed, the slug populations or the slugs will actually accumulate insecticide. And then when a slug predator comes through, whether it's a wolf spider or whether it's a lightning bug larva, and they attack the slug and eat it, they'll ingest enough insecticide to kill themselves because of unwise use of insecticides. But if you look around here, you should be able to see small spiders as they dart away, some different beetle species underneath these residues. And that's a sign of a healthy soil, is to see all these insects out in the field. It's a constant process. Every year we're evaluating what it costs to put this cover crop out. We're evaluating what our manure analysis is, how much manure we're going to save. So we always have to keep evaluating things, and Karl does that with his data. You know, the data that he collects from the combine is really important for us to make these type of decisions.
This is the monitor that goes with the combine. It's pulling out our yield data, and this is an iPad this is Climate Field View running currently. So it's pulling all the data out of this and putting it onto our maps here. As you can see, these couple blue lines here, these are some strip trials. And we can actually, while we're going here, we can pull up hybrid lines and kind of show you, what trials we got going on in the field here. So we use it to track everything from planting through spraying to harvest. The unique thing about it is the analysis tool is very, very quick and very precise. So we can pick out certain passes we see. We get satellite imagery throughout the season, identify the good spots versus the weak spots. We've actually found green snap corn with it at times, disease pressure late in the season, stuff like that. So we've used that heavily the last 4 to 5 years to really pull data apart. Split applying nitrogen trials, a lot of variety trials where we'll split a planter in half, plant 8 rows of one variety, 8 rows of another across multiple acres to try to get a better feel for it. I think it's an underutilized tool. A lot of the newer equipment does have it. A lot of people don't take the time to calibrate it. Beyond just calibrating the combine, everything we harvest gets weighed on a scale at home, on a truck scale. So even if our calibrations are a little off, we do fine tune them at the end and know exactly what we get. All the yield data we pull here and all the fertility trials, we'll go back to that, just trying to be more efficient and more productive. with an acre. Just trying to get basically the most bang for your buck on any given acre of land is kind of what our goal is. And the 4R program really fits very well into that. We are a CAFO with our hog operation. We used to also have layer chickens. So we've been soil testing very heavily for the last 2 decades and balancing our fertility off of that.
Soil testing could be thought of as one of the most basic 4R and regulatory tools that we use here in Pennsylvania. All of our fertility plans, all of our nutrient plans are based off of soil testing. So soil testing is not rocket science. Soil testing is going through a field like this, stopping 8 times, 10 times throughout the field to pull one of these cores, putting it into a bucket, mixing it together and sending it out. It's something that we should be doing on all of our fields at least every other year, just to monitor our nutrient levels to make sure that our agronomic production is being maximized, as well as to monitor those nutrient levels to make sure that our phosphorus levels are not excessive and are not causing undue risk to water quality. When we apply nutrients to our fields, whether it's in the form of manure or whether it's in the form of commercial fertilizer, we're using those 4R practices to make sure that the nutrients we apply end up in the plant. When we're getting realistic yield goals and we're matching nitrogen or matching phosphorus applications for those realistic yield goals, we're limiting the risk of nitrogen moving off-site. And even if we're applying 4R practices, we still need to make sure that we have edge of field and off-site best management practices in place. We have waterways, we have riparian buffers, and other edge of field practices that can help soak up that nitrogen before it enters the surface water and becomes a problem. Karl, can you talk to us about your buffer, how this buffer came to be?
Yeah, so this is our riparian buffer through a program called CREP. Initially, it was put in about 12 years ago, just renewed the contract this year. What it is, it's a program to plant trees and establish a buffer between field and stream to kind of pick up any extra nutrients we might lose.
So you had recently put manure on this field,
Yep.
like this morning, and the buffer is helping to protect the surface water from any runoff that may occur from this?
It works great for this ground. Typically, the setback is about 100 feet from the creek. Typically, we mow it after nesting season in the latter part of August or September. And that's about it.
So how many hours a year do you think you have invested in CREP maintenance?
On the average, probably less than 30.
Are you seeing a lot of other benefits of having this buffer?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some wildlife come back into the area, and just the efficiency of it, not having to farm it, it's pretty great.
Is this ground more profitable in CREP or more profitable in cropland?
It is more profitable in CREP. Regenerative ag is going to be pretty big. For what we can grow out of the ground and the carbon we can suck up in a year, it is pretty impressive. And as our yields escalate, we're doing more every year. And as we diversify cropping practices, cover crops, stuff like that, I think it's going to become a bigger and bigger thing. Understanding yield goals and proper application of fertilizer, I think it's our number one. Just understanding what we are actually capable of on every farm. We don't treat every farm the same. We don't use a blanket effect. I think we fine tune every acre of ground we have to what we need. Understanding the importance of manure has been another one. Not just dumping it all in one, the closest spot. We've done a lot more moving. Putting all the manure on one farm and all the commercial on another doesn't work. Moving that around has been highly beneficial.
So a farmer adopting a practice, any 4R practice, like using starter fertilizer or doing a split application, we'll talk to them about trying that on small acres first. If you have 80 acres of corn, maybe let's try split application on 5 acres and see how the results are come fall. Maybe if you're looking at modifying your corn planter and you're not quite sure if you want nitrogen set up at planting or if you want to continue putting it in the row, go to your neighbor and see what corn planter they have. Maybe they can come over and plant a field of corn for you and you can compare your practices versus their practices.
Small management details. Precision agriculture has been huge for us. I think that's given us another 10 to 20% what we had before. Just understanding the details of what we do year in and year out has been pretty big. When I was younger, this was the draw. You get to drive the equipment. Anymore, it's more the thrill of growing a crop. The equipment, it's great, but kind of seeing what you put in and what you get out is kind of the bigger reward at this point. I think that's been the greatest part about testing all this stuff. I almost turned it more into a competition than anything else. can we do better than we did the year before? Or, you know, can we find something else that, you know, elevates us to a new yield plateau? It's kind of been the joy of farming at this point. Seeing a crop from start to finish has been pretty neat. And it's amazing what we can do with an acre of land versus what we could do with an acre of land, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's incredible what we can produce. Yeah, we're in the good part of the field now. And she's pumping 250, 260 now.
So Karl, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for being part of that video. If anybody has questions for Karl as you're watching the videos, please type them into the chat, and we'll get to them towards the end when we have our question and answer session. But yeah, type them into the chat. We won't forget about them. We'll get to them. So Karl, 2 questions for you. 2020, you were the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Farmer, one of the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Farmers of the Year at the 2020 National No-Till Conference. What does being a 4R farmer mean to you?
Hey, thanks, Eric. Yeah, being a 4R farmer for us, it means being responsible with the way we farm and how we farm on a daily basis, but also being productive at the same time. So I think through the 4Rs, you know, we've gained a lot of, by practicing those practices, we've gained a lot of efficiencies. We've also increased production over time without really costing us any more money, and kind of understanding how we farm and all the decisions we make within that. And we've been responsible in the environment. We've also been more profitable, which at the end of the day is the most important part for us. We are running a business, and yeah, being 4R, we've accomplished all those things the 4R program offers or kind of stands for, and it made us better farmers through it.
So when you think of how 4Rs make sense on your farm, it seems like it's a combination of managing input costs, increasing efficiencies, and raising yields. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, it's a great summary. And I think for us, it really started with the efficiency side of it. Trying to figure out, you know, where we could gain some profitability within what we were doing already. And through that, we've gained better fertilizer use efficiency. So we're growing corn, and sometimes we're applying more fertilizer, and sometimes we're applying less, and getting better yields because of it. You know, there were spots we over applied before where we didn't need to use as much, and there were spots we under applied. And gaining those efficiencies was the biggest starting factor for us.
Talk to me about equipment efficiencies and what you're doing on the equipment side to increase efficiency.
Yeah, so our equipment has changed drastically over the last 15 years. You know, 15 years ago, we were a mostly all tillage operation. That's about when I came into the business. So we had more tractors. We had, you know, 3 passes of tillage that we don't do anymore. Planters were a little smaller. We didn't farm quite as much back then. And through that, we've taken out a lot of manpower. So, you know, we can cover the acres we do with basically 1 or 2 people most of the time, because we're not doing those 3 passes of tillage. We're not burning all that fuel. We don't have all those tractors we used to have. And now it's basically a sprayer, a planter, and a combine. And we do everything through that. Even, you know, through our cover cropping, we've eliminated a couple tools as well. We don't do any vertical tillage or anything like that. Our cover cropping in the fall has taken care of a lot of those issues of breaking down some residue and doing that kind of stuff.
So if you were to think about some recent practices that you've done, you know, like putting nitrogen on the planter or doing variable feeding or any other equipment change that you would have made, how long does it normally take you to see profitability from this?
That's a complicated question. I mean, there's years where we put planter attachments on and where we changed the planter brand at one point, and we saw an immediate effect on that. You know, certain attachments have given us certain bushels that we can calculate because we've done side-by-side trials where we've gotten rid of row cleaners or put new, you know, wheels on the back and had better closing and better affected no-till, where we've seen immediate turn backs, or even like row clutches, for instance. You know, it's been one of the most efficient decisions on the planting side, because all of a sudden we saved 3%, 4% on seed because of our odd shaped fields. And even more than that, just saving on the seed, not having the overlap, and actually increasing our yields in those 3 to 4% of the fields as well. And that's been huge. So there's years where we see an immediate effect. And there's years where it's, you know, cover crops. It took us a couple years to see that, the building of soil structure, and, you know, call it what you might, maybe soil health, which I think is kind of a vague term, which really no one has a good handle on. What does that mean? For us, it means productive soil. So cover crops have made our soil more productive. We can be on it longer. You know, we can get in quicker after the soil is more stable. We're not getting near the runoff. You know, we're retaining topsoil like we didn't used to. I mean, we don't have the gullies anymore. We don't have stuff like that. And topsoil is one of those things that once it's gone, we're not getting it back. We can't build that back in here. That takes a lifetime to get back. And we've seen our nutrient efficiency rates go up, I think, because of that.
All right, thank you. We're gonna switch now, play the second video that Karl helped us put together. And actually, Karl, one more question that just came into the chat. Question is, do you qualify to increase your CREP buffer? You know, right now you have 100-foot buffer. Do you qualify to extend that out to 350 if you wanted to?
I don't know the answer to that question. We renewed our contract for existing. That's kind of where we figured our profitability line kind of ended. Because once we get that far away from the creek, we're back into really good dirt, where it doesn't quite make as much sense. But I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to talk to an Nrcs agent.
That's an interesting comment you made about the profitability line. Expand upon that for us. So
the ground on my farm that is in CREP, it was very low lying. It was low lying enough that we couldn't farm it. So previously it had been put into pasture years ago. Well, pasture for us really doesn't fit our operation. We're not big cattle people. So we weren't really making anything off that dirt. It was almost underutilized, in my opinion. And cattle also aren't great for the creek. So for us, it kind of solved two problems. It was, you know, we got rid of the cattle, we got rid of the pasture, and it made it a little more profitable for us to have it. It was 10 acres of basically unused ground to a certain degree. So that, and something we couldn't farm efficiently.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, Katie, we'll turn it back to you, and you can get the second video up and running.
Sounds good. And people can continue to enter questions into the chat box, and we will have another Q&A period at the end of the session. So right now I'm going to share the video.
From a Wolgemuth Farview Farm standpoint, they're a very diversified operation. They have the hogs, they have the cropland, and Karl also has a seed business. He sells seed to local farmers in the area, making sure that they're positioning genetics on the landscape that are going to be top performers and that are going to lead to economic outcomes that the farms in the area want to see.
I've been with Wolgemuth Farview for about 15 years. Started out just doing general farm work, helping take care of the animals. That morphed into the farm manager for the cropping side of the operation. So I figured out my passion was cropping and growing better crops, and turned into more of a research kind of thing. Got into the seed sales business about 7 years ago. The prior research we did on the farm transitioned very well into the seed business.
What was your interest in selling seed and getting into seed genetics?
Years ago, we just let someone else place everything. You know, we just chucked it in the field and didn't spend as much time on placement. When we started getting into technology and field mapping and yield monitors, all that about 10, 15 years ago, we started seeing some pretty big differences on maps. And I remember my first time I did it, we had a 16-row corn planter, we split 8 and 8 with a variety, and we harvested it with a combine, we mapped it, and I brought it up in the computer and started seeing different colored lines in the yield map. And we isolated that, and where a spot in the field was good, the yield was the same. You know, towards the road, towards the end of the field, where the soil type changed drastically into shalier type soil, we saw as much as a 46 bushel yield advantage for one particular hybrid, just due to stress tolerance.
And right now, what seed companies are you selling for?
We sell for multiple seed companies. We sell for DeKalb, we sell for LG, we sell for Brabant, Mid-Atlantic Seeds, local seed company, as well as we produce some of our own wheat seed.
Why so many different companies? Why so many different genetics?
We've found a lot of advantages with running multiple companies. In the United States, there's about 4 major companies that handle genetics anymore for corn and soybean seed, and we are accessing 3 of those. So to find the best seed, we can source from multiple companies and find the best selection for our acres.
How much will the end result vary 10 miles south and 10 miles north from those genetics you place on the field?
Yeah, pretty significantly, actually. We've done quite a bit of research on that in the last few years. We've found some hybrids that have done extremely well in this very close geographic, that if you go 10 miles south into different soil types, water holding capacities increase or decrease significantly. So that's been a big research item we've done, having plots in different parts of the counties, and also just communicating with our growers, you know, what's working the best in what regions and where to push certain items. So variety selection for a field like this is a lot based on past history and kind of when we want to harvest. So it is a longer season hybrid. For here, it's a 112-day hybrid. About 80% of the field is one hybrid we know has done well in past years, one of our biggest movers. So what we've done is we've brought in about 4 other varieties in this field to compare to it. So 2 are competition hybrids, 1 is another in-house hybrid. They're all throughout this big part of the field here. So it goes over a wide range of soil types. The soil type changes about 3 times here, as well as some high stress spots with rock ledges and stuff like that. So we'll take all that data from those 4 trials we have in here and kind of look at it, say, hey, you know, are these up and coming things better than what we have currently?
What's the difference in relative maturity, and why is it important for farmers to spread the risk out with the maturities?
So here we have 2 reports. We got a 104 to 110-day maturity and a 110 to 115. What we've really kind of learned the last few years is, I like a lot of the people I work with to spread out their maturity, just based on heat, time, and rain during the summer. You can spread that maturity window out further. It spreads your pollination window out maybe over a month versus a week. And like heat stress we saw this year, we saw certain varieties and maturities do poorly because of just the timing of pollination versus some other hybrids that did really well because they matured a little bit later. And if you can space out your maturity on a farm, much bigger window to just try to make your average better rather than having it all do great or all do bad. We can have a bit of both, seems to a lot better.
So we're talking about risk management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What computer program are you using to manage data on the farm?
So primarily we use Climate, which you see here. These are some reports we built out of Climate for some of our side-by-side trials. And through our side-by-side trials, what we're doing is we're planting multiple acre plots. So we're taking a 16-row corn planter, we're planting 8 and 8 across. In here we're at 6 acres, and this one we're at 8 acres side-by-sides. So then we go back and harvest with a combine, and we map out the individual yield passes of separate hybrids. This is a farm that has high stress. Rocky dirt, dries out, didn't have a lot of rainfall this year, probably one of our lower productive farms. And it's interesting what we learned here is, in the first one over here, we had a perennial hybrid that was always one of our best stress hybrids. We've sold it for years, very good stress tolerance, great yielder in all environments really. And in here, we brought a new one out this year, same maturity, different number, that looked really good in plots last year, and we had a 7 bushel advantage on it in this instance. So that kind of tells us, hey, we can gain a little bit here on a stressful environment. The interesting part about that is we took that same hybrid, the newer one, and put it up against another new one on the same farm, and we had another +7. So all of a sudden, we can say that hybrid A is going to have a 15 bushel advantage on our older hybrid, which is pretty significant. So, you know, going forward, we're going to lean pretty hard on this one. We've got a couple years of data on it now. And if you take this same hybrid, these same 2 hybrids, and you reverse the role on really good soils, like here on our home farm, we're probably going to see the opposite, which we did in plots, probably about a +10 advantage the other way. So that's where we've learned placement is pretty important.
Thinking about 4 R's and source, rate, time, and place, we've obviously focused on the source and getting the right genetics in the right place on that right acre. What about rate? What kind of practices are you doing, or what kind of research are you doing to determine the right rate of seed?
All right. So here we have variable rate trial we performed last year. This is a kind of an overview of the in 3 different trials last year. and shown the differences. Here you can kind of see where our planter was doing variable rate. So it would, through climate, we made a map based on yield zones and satellite imagery from the last 5 years to determine our yield. And we also entered the hybrid. So the hybrid's got a certain rating on what kind of populations it can handle in what environment, and potential yield, what we're shooting for, and fertility. And we set our variable rate planning off of that. So our stock planting rate was 34,000, and the variable rate map was actually the same average, but it went from anywhere from 28 to 39,000, I believe. So we did the trial 3 different times where we did side-by-side blocks over a 10-acre span, and we saw a 7, a 9, and a 2 bushel increase. At no point did we have a negative. So 6 bushel average across 3 plots proved to us that it's a good practice to start looking into more. And we did the same trials this year, ended up in that 6 bushel range as well. We already had the equipment, it's just a matter of making the maps very low cost. We had all the data, which we've been collecting for years. And if you figure a 6 bushel increase, let's say on the low end at $4, you're already at $24 an acre increase without doing a whole lot of work. I think the variable rate fertility will come as the variable rate planting increases to try to match the fertility versus the potential of that hybrid in that part of the field. I think that's going to be the evolution towards that. Try to get every ounce you can out of a certain acre and realize your spots where you just don't need as much just based on the potential.
So from being able to grow the wheat and being able to market wheat and position wheat on your customers' acres, has that influenced cover crop sales and cover crop mixes at all?
Not influence, but it's something we've been in for a long time. So we do a lot of the Nrcs 4-way mixes for guys that have been enrolled in that program, and a lot of farmers are adopting it on their own. So we're doing 2, 3, 4, 5-way blends. A lot of small grain, some clovers, radish, canola, stuff like that, some hairy vetch. And it's becoming more of a trend. Also doing some triticale annual ryegrass for some dairy producers, getting some better forage quality and tonnage out of that.
And so you'll mix all those species in your blender over here?
Yeah, so our blender also acts as a seed mixer. So we clean the machine out after we get done treating, and we'll start taking multiple species, weigh them out, and then we'll blend them together and then retail them.
So the field that we're standing at right now is a field where you do a lot of your plots and your research. Looks like manure is being applied today. It looks like there's a cover crop put in here. Can you share with us kind of how the fall management works in the fields? Yeah,
so we crops would have been harvested about 3 or 4 weeks ago off of here. Shortly after that, we'd cover crop in with about a week after. So our cover crop's been growing for about 2 weeks. Looks like we're about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of growth at this point. And once we got a good cover crop establishment, we do fall apply some manure on ground that sits a little higher and can take it in the fall.
What cover crop mix are you using?
This is a wheat barley mix this year. So trying to keep it economical, but get good growth for the fall. I think the best way to start testing, find something that you're passionate about. Is it hybrid? Is it fertility? Is it planting practices? And start small and work your way up. Get some ideas from your local retailers, neighbors. What's someone else doing different than you? Can you find a difference with that? So just trying to continually get better is where we started and kind of evolved.
So 2 practices, variety selection and variable rate at planting, that can lead to big jumps in yield.
Coming.
All right, thank you, Karl, for helping us with that. That was a fun video to put together. So wanted to talk a little bit about the one comment you had in there about variety selection on a stressful environment led to anywhere from a 7 to 15 bushel yield advantage. If you do the calculations on that, 15 bushel yield advantage times normal phosphorus removal, you're increasing your phosphorus removal by about 6 pounds per acre per year, just because you're making better variety decisions. Have you seen a drastic decrease in soil phosphorus levels since you started doing better with variety placement?
Yeah, I think we have. I know you and I have actually tracked that here the last 5 years, and it's impressive the way the graph is going down at this point. And with us, we have high phosphorus levels from past mismanagement of manure. I mean, a couple generations ago. It's still something we're kind of dealing with. Being in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, we're monitored pretty heavily. Phosphorus is not something we apply other than manure. It's never something we buy commercially. So we're actually on too high on the spectrum. And those levels have decreased substantially over the last 5 to 10 years. We've really been tracking it. And a lot of that is because we continually yield more every year. Our plateau keeps getting higher and higher.
So what was your average yield for 2020?
Corn, I think we were sitting around 230. We had a good year despite we had some droughty issues there midsummer. Soybeans, mid-high 70s full season, and double crops should have been higher, but we got frosted early, so we're still rough low 40s.
So your average 230, the field that we had taken a lot of the combine video in, what was the range of yield within that field?
Oh, that field was huge. I mean, that field's got some really nasty rock ledges that cut across it. So you'll see yields in that farm once you get up the hill anywhere from, you get passes of 130, 140, the whole way up to 280, 290. So the variability on a lot of our ground is like that.
Gotcha. So right now you're doing some variable rate seeding, and Tim had put a question into the chat about doing variable rate fertility. When do you think is going to be the right point for you to take the step to do variable rate fertility?
I think we're going to start doing some variable rate fertility with nitrogen this year. A lot of the rest of our fertility, we don't have to apply any potash at this point. Any phosphorus at this point. Potash is something we've been playing with. We did some strip trials last year with some ground applied potash, increasing, decreasing rates. We haven't found a lot with that yet. It's something we're going to continue to play with here. But we're going to do some nitrogen modeling this year to see if we can get any increases out of that.
So what nutrients do you think move the needle for where you are in an average of 230 bushel corn? What nutrients are moving the needle?
Nitrogen obviously is the one that always gets highlighted the most because it's the easiest. It's one of the cheapest. I think there's just as much over applying as there is under applying because no one ever wants to run out. But I think the most important nutrient is the one you're lacking. And that's been something we've been trying to find, what piece of the puzzle are we missing? What nutrient, moves the needle the most. And every year seems to be different. Soil types seem to be different. So for us, sometimes it is nitrogen. Sometimes it's potash. A few years ago, it was sulfur. As we, kind of learned that sulfur was kind of leaving the atmosphere with, cleaning up some of the emission stuff. We've had to apply significantly more sulfur the last 5, 6, 10 years than we did previously to that. And that's been one of the biggest ones that has moved the needle once we kind of figured out where that line was.
So after you address sulfur, take care of nitrogen and potassium, what do you think the next nutrient is going to be that you're going to take a look at?
Just kind of looking more at some of the micros and stuff and kind of seeing if we need to balance anything with maybe even any biologicals or stuff like that. And you and I have talked about that. We played with some contest yields, adding some extra magnesium and things like that. And I haven't really narrowed it down to one. Just kind of playing with a combination of a few different things to see what moves the needle.
So one of the questions that came in last week after our webinar had ended, and I'm going to try to paraphrase it here. Katie had just put it into the group chat. But after consulting fees, equipment changes, all things considered, does the 4R program allow farmers to produce the same yield with less money? Let's break that down into two sections. Let's take the first one. After consulting fees, equipment changes, and all things are considered. With all the changes that you make and with all the money you pay outside consultants and advisors, how do you gauge the return on investment from some of these things?
You gauge your return. So yeah, just kind of the increases. We have tracked our yields every year we've gone up, and we track our inputs very heavily. And we've changed consultants, and we've seen drastic decreases in inputs that next year. And then they've helped us, figure out where that line is. So we always compare our inputs to our yield goals. Weather can play a part in that, how much that affects it. yeah, we've seen, increase in yield while decreasing a lot of inputs. And sometimes it's an agronomist pushing us to input more into one sector and pull out of another and still getting a yield increase. So the balancing has definitely paid itself off by using the right consultants.
Yeah, I think I can share the consultant perspective on that. Consulting fees, you can figure anywhere from $4 to $6 for some services. You can figure $10 an acre for some other services. The majority of what we do is kind of in that $4 to $6 an acre range. But how a farmer interacts with a consultant is very different. I mean, number one, if a farmer is out there looking for a consultant, first thing he's going to do is go talk to his friends and his neighbors. The majority of new customers that we work with, they don't really call us up and interview us. They just call us up and say, hey, we want to work with you because we talk to our brother, we talk to our cousins, we talk to a lot of our friends at church. They use you, they have good things to say about you. And that's how our business grows. But the consulting fees, I think farmers are more looking at what kind of change we're going to make on their operation, how we're going to work with them to manage their input costs, how we're going to help them adopt new technologies, and how we're going to move the ball forward. And I think, Karl, the second part of this question here, does the 4R program allow farmers to produce the same yield with less money? Majority of our progressive growers, they hire us to push yield, drive production. The average corn yield in the corn growers contest goes up by about 2.4 bushels per year. So if we're not increasing yield, we've got a problem. And sometimes you can help a farm reduce their input costs or manage their input costs, but you have to do that in conjunction with driving production, right? If production doesn't go up, you've got a problem. What's your thoughts on producing the same or less money?
Our object has never really been to save more, spend more. It's been trying to be the most efficient. So yeah, I really do. I think you can produce more with what you have already is usually the kind of the motto we went with. And moving, we move fertility around, where we spend on fertility or where we spend on chemicals or residuals and stuff like that to kind of move the needle. The object was never to save; it was to do better, be more efficient, be more productive. And we've had better utilization because of that.
Another question that came in here. If you could no longer apply manure due to regulation, what would you do?
It's an interesting question because a lot of our ground kind of teeters on that too high phosphorus level. I'm very encouraged by how much our phosphorus has gone down the last few years. And I think we're trending the right way. I've been a big advocate of, farming really isn't the issue here with the bay thing. It's a lot of the growth of towns and sewage plants and stuff like that. It would be a really hard decision because our operation is very heavily based on our animals. And then that manure gives us so much back. I don't think we even fully realize yet what that all gives us. But I am very encouraged on how our phosphorus rates have gone down. I think you've seen that personally, Eric. And it's an impressive number. I didn't think we could move the needle like that, and we really have.
So speaking of manure, you're going to start doing some low disturbance manure injection this year. Walk us through that decision and how you arrived at that.
Hey, we've seen, a lot of advertising, this is kind of how some other states have moved. For us, it's that efficiency factor. Can we trap any more nitrogen that we're losing in the atmosphere when we apply over the top? Can we become more efficient with that manure? Can we decrease nitrogen rates and maybe keep some more of that, phos and everything there? So it's on the efficiency scale. It doesn't cost a lot more. We're going to do some trials where we inject versus surface supply, do some check strips with no extra nitrogen and applied to see if we can utilize every bit of that nitrogen we apply to the soil.
Some of the other questions that we had, I think we had talked with Mike about this last week. You adopt no-till, and sometimes you expect a 2 or 3 year yield drag through that adoption practice. Are there any other 4R practices that you've done that have given you a yield drag that maybe, you know, for the first couple of years of adoption, yields aren't great, but then they pick up? Or is it simply you adopt a practice and it goes forward?
No, because I think we've always been pretty safe when we adopt a new practice to just do a small allotment of it. So we're doing a few acres out of hundreds to kind of see if that practice is going to work the way we think it should. So we've never really taken big yield hits on anything. And even no-till anymore, I think, you know, yeah, 10, 15 years ago when you got into it, you took a hit because the understanding just wasn't there. But even farms we've picked up here in the last 5, 10 years that we've gone straight from a continuous tilled field to no-till, we're not seeing that yield drag anymore because we kind of understand the practices now. We understand what equipment, you know, what fertility we're looking at to try to get that in right away. And I think we've gone up right away.
So one other question for you. You had mentioned biological products early on. How do you see farmers incorporating biological products into their nutrient management plan or into their soil health initiatives?
I think biologicals, you got to start with a soil test. You know, are you lacking anything? Can we see anything that's not there? I think a lot of time biologics are sold just to sell them. I've been pretty critical on that. It's not something I push. We test a lot of it. We found some that work. We found a lot that don't. A lot of the reason for us is we have a lot of manure and we get most of our biologicals from that. There's stuff in there that we don't even calculate for that we're getting that we need to kind of understand a little better. So the biggest thing I can say there is test, test, test. I'm a retailer and I'll still say don't trust everything a retailer tells you because they're trying to sell something. And that's why I love working with independent agronomists like Eric, like some other guys I know in the industry, is because they're going to take, you know, a reality. They're going to look at it from the outside. There's, you know, true third party advice is the biggest thing because they're not trying to sell you anything. You know, Eric's going to say, hey, you know, this could work because maybe we're lacking this. I see this on the test. You know, I've seen this work for another guy. And that's kind of how we approach stuff. We've looked at a lot of products. We've probably looked at more than most, and we've had a lot fail. And we've had a couple work pretty well.
Yeah, I would say from a consultant standpoint, you know, if you're a farmer looking to use a consultant, or if you're even you know, a conservation district or NRCS organization looking to engage consultants, make sure that the consultants you're looking for are qualified. You know, we have the Certified Crop Advisor organization that consultants can be a part of. The Certified Crop Advisor organization, you get your CCA, which is kind of the industry standard for agronomists, but then you can take it farther and you can get specialty certifications. There's a CCA specialty certification for 4R nutrient stewardship. There's one for precision ag, there's one for weed resistance, and there's also one for sustainability. So if you're looking to put together any kind of project, or if you're looking to engage a consultant, ask them what their credentials are and ask them how they view their credentials and what they're used for. Karl, one question that Dean had put into the group, into the group chat: what's your next priority nutrient related yield barrier that you plan to tackle? And I think I would also kind of add that into your starter fertilizer, dry fertilizer blend experiments that you've been doing over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think we're gonna play some more starter this year to try to see if we can get that plant any happier in the beginning. I think one thing we played with some drip irrigation. I think one thing we've struggled with that we're trying to figure out is, you know, we see deficiencies in crops at certain times of the year, and we can apply massive amounts of something, let's say magnesium, for instance, and we just cannot get uptake. So trying to figure out how to unlock that plant to get that uptake has been one of the barriers that we've started to fight a little bit. You know, and what, you know, understanding soil tests sometimes too, you know, really understanding what's holding us back. We're still getting through that a little bit. I've talked to quite a few farmers about that. You know, can we get uptake? And some of that is because some of our levels are too high in something? And is it the soil structure? Is it the heavy soil, the light soil? you know, we've seen some incredible yields come out of the south where they really don't have a soil test at all. It's just basically sand. And then they get uptake like crazy. And does that fight us in this area, you know, just because of our soil type? And, you know, where is that line of, well, we can't go any higher than this because this is all it has potential to do. So we kind of play with that back and forth. And again, we do that on small trials to kind of understand where we're at.